This is required training for all staff and volunteers of FCF, but will also be of great benefit to any who have chosen to make FCF their church home. Overview. Welcome to the AODA training module, which is part of Flamborough Christian Fellowship's requirements under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005, or more commonly referred to as AODA. This training module is designed to introduce you to the legislation, review the purpose of the legislation, outline some of the barriers individuals with disabilities may face, provide some tips on how to strengthen our interactions with individuals with disabilities, review a couple of specific scenarios. Upon completion of the training module, all staff and volunteers of FCF will be required to complete a quiz and submit it to the FCF administrator. The purpose of this evaluation is twofold: quiz you on the knowledge you gained as a result of the training, provide documentation that training has taken place. Why is the AODA important? We all benefit when everyone has access to places, people, and experiences. People with disabilities already on a daily basis make many contributions to our community and province as a whole. It is recognized, however, that as a society we can and must do better. By facilitating the full participation of all individuals in our community, it enhances our quality of life, and it is an investment that makes good economic sense. The AODA vision. It is hoped that through this legislation, Ontario will become fully accessible to everyone with a disability by the year 2025. To accomplish this, fundamental and comprehensive change is required to ensure accessible buildings, communication services, and employment for people with disabilities. It will also require individuals and organizations to be informed and to change attitudes, values, and behaviors towards accessibility. Who are people with disabilities? The AODA uses the same definition of disability as the Ontario Human Rights Code. In this act, disability covers many things. Any degree of physical disability, infirmity, malformation, or disfigurement that is caused by bodily injury, birth defects, or illness, and without limiting the generality of the foregoing, includes all of the following. Disability also includes a condition of mental impairment or developmental disability, a learning disability or dysfunction in one or more of the processes involved in understanding or using symbols or spoken language, a mental disorder, or an injury or disability for which benefits were claimed and received under the insurance plan established under the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, 1997. At Flamborough Christian Fellowship, our goal is to be a welcoming community, providing for all to access and benefit from our ministry. So, not only is AODA required by law, but it also complements our goals here at FCF. Legislation. The AODA was passed in 2005. The purpose of the Act is to benefit all Ontarians by developing, implementing, and enforcing accessibility standards in 5 specific areas which will be phased in over time: customer service, information and communications, transportation, employment, built environment. Decreasing barriers. The standards require the people or organizations identified in the standard to identify, remove, and prevent barriers for people with disabilities in key areas of living. Barriers keep people with disabilities from fully participating in activities that most of us take for granted. What are barriers? A barrier is anything, both visible and invisible, that keeps someone with a disability from fully participating in all aspects of society because of their disability. Some common barriers which are expanded on in the next slides include attitude, architectural and structural, communication and information, technology, systemic. Attitude. Attitude is a major barrier. Changing attitudes towards individuals with disabilities is one of the key areas of the legislation. In some cases, people are just uncomfortable dealing with individuals with a disability or are unsure of how to communicate with those who have visible or non-visible disabilities. In other situations, they may feel that they could offend the individual with a disability by offering help, so they ignore or avoid people with disabilities altogether. Sometimes they simply discriminate against them because of stereotypes. Architectural or structural. Although progress has been made, there are still design elements in buildings such as stairs, doorways, the width of hallways, and even room layouts that prevent individuals with certain disabilities from entering or accessing the services or goods provided. Information and communication. Traditional methods of communication and providing information make it difficult for some people to receive or convey that information. For example, a deaf person cannot communicate via standard telephone. Technology. Although technology has provided many new and innovative ways to make goods and services accessible, everyday tools like computers, telephones, and other aids can all present barriers if they are not set up or designed with accessibility in mind. Systemic. Many organizations do not set out to discriminate against individuals with disabilities, but traditional policies, practices, or procedures may restrict people with disabilities, often unintentionally. For example, some clothing stores have a no refund policy. On the surface, this does not seem discriminatory, but it assumes that everyone is able to try the item on to ensure it fits before they buy it. It does not take into consideration a person with a scooter who is unable to enter a change room. AODA Accessibility Standards. The Customer Service Standard is the first of these standards, requiring legislative compliance, and applies to all private, nonprofit, and public organizations or people in Ontario that provide goods or services and have one or more employees. Since 2008, organizations in various sectors and sizes have had to meet specific compliance dates. The definition of customer service in a church environment can be interpreted as those who come to our church, such as congregation members, church attendants, students, community friends, etc. It also may extend to include those who rent the church building facilities for weddings, funerals, conferences, etc. Summary of the requirements. To meet the customer service standard, policies, practices, and procedures on providing goods or services to people with disabilities must be established and put in place. We must use reasonable efforts to ensure that our policies, practices, and procedures are consistent with the core principles of independence, dignity, integration, and equality of opportunity. We must also notify individuals that documents required under the customer service standard are available upon request, and when given documents required under the customer service standard to a person with a disability, provide the information in a format that takes into account the person's disability. AODA manuals. Copies of these policies, practices, and procedures will be available on our website under About Us and form part of our overall training for staff and volunteers at FCF. They will be accessible for staff and volunteers as well as to the general public. The AODA program materials will include such items as considering a person's disability when communicating with them, allowing assistive devices in our workplace like wheelchairs, allowing service animals, welcoming support persons, letting individuals know where accessible services aren't available, inviting individuals to provide feedback. Accessible customer service is not about ramps or automatic door openers. It's about understanding that people with disabilities may have different needs. Tips on providing service to customers with disabilities. If you are not sure what to do, ask, "May I help you?" Speak directly to the person with a disability, not their support person or companion. Avoid stereotypes and make no assumptions about what type of disability or disabilities the person has. Take time to know your customer's needs and focus on meeting those needs just as you would with any other customer. Make an effort to learn about appropriate language and terminology to use when referring to people with disabilities. Be patient. People with certain disabilities may take a little longer to understand and respond. A good start is to listen carefully. Don't touch assistive devices, including wheelchairs, without permission. If you cannot understand what your customer is saying, politely ask them to repeat themselves. Don't touch or speak to service animals. They are working and have to pay attention at all times. Consider offering interactive devices such as self-serve checkouts, direct payments that can be used by a person with various types of disabilities, or offering alternative services, including people with disabilities in the testing or evaluation of your communication services. Serving people with disabilities. In addition to the PowerPoint, in the member section of the FCF website, there is a link to an article by Accessible Ontario Customer Service entitled Tips for Serving Customers with Disabilities, which contains specific tips on dealing with individuals with specific disabilities. Service animals can be helpful to people with disabilities, such as guide dogs accompanying people with vision loss, helping alert an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing to events around them, warning a person of a seizure before it happens. Service animals must be allowed to go everywhere with their owner. In all situations, the owner is responsible for looking after the animal. Remember, service animals are working animals. You should never touch, call, or make eye contact with the animals. Don't distract them from their important job. Service animals are not allowed in areas where food is manufactured, prepared, or processed. If another employee, member, or attendee is severely allergic to the service animal, consider talking to both parties to determine if they can be in separate areas of the church while receiving the same access. Let the elders and directors know of any unresolved issues. Support persons. Some people with disabilities will be with a support person. The support person might be a personal support worker, a volunteer, a family member, or a friend. Support persons may assist with speaking, mobility, personal, or medical needs of a person with a disability. If you are not sure which person is the support person, simply ask. Always speak directly to the person with a disability and not the support person. Support persons can go anywhere with the person with a disability. If you discuss confidential matters with the person with a disability, make sure that they want the support person present. Personal assistive devices. People with disabilities may use devices such as wheelchairs, walkers, canes, or hearing aids. Always remember that these devices belong to the person using them and are part of their personal space. Do not lean on, reach over, or restrict the movement of a device. Problems accessing services. If a person with a disability has trouble accessing your services, be patient, positive, and flexible. Begin by asking how you can best help them. Here are a few typical situations and possible solutions. A person who is deaf without an interpreter. Ask if using a pen and a paper would help. A person who is in a wheelchair or with limited mobility. Ask if you can help by bringing books, food, or other items to them. A person with vision loss, unable to read a sign. Ask if you could read the information to them. A person with a physical disability, unable to use doors. Ask if you can hold the door open for them. Service disruptions. Services for people with disabilities can be disrupted in several ways. Disruptions include elevators that are out of order, computer networks that are down, or doors to buildings that are restricted. Try to be aware of service disruptions so that you can direct individuals to other elevators or doors. Provide signs telling people that there is a disruption and when the service is expected to resume. Feedback. We must be ready to receive comments on the service we provide to people with disabilities. The feedback process is outlined in our AODA policy. They allow feedback to be provided in person, by telephone, in writing, by email, or by other electronic means. Responses to feedback must be communicated in a way that is accessible to the person with the disability. Thank you for listening to this training video. If we all work together, we can make FCF more accessible to people with disabilities. In doing so, we will help level the playing field, increase opportunities, and ensure a clear path to accessibility for everyone. This concludes the teaching section. The following slides involve exercises to help you consider practical situations in which this training may apply. This section is a required part of the training for staff and volunteers of FCF. However, it is recommended for all who are a part of our congregation. There will be no audio until the final slide. Please feel free to pause the video and consider the questions before proceeding to the next slide. Thank you for investing in making FCF a better place for everyone. Conclusion: if we make FCF more accessible to people with disabilities, we help level the playing field, increase opportunities, and ensure a clear path to accessibility for everyone. This concludes the course. Remember to complete and submit the quiz. Thank you.